Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Phoebe and today I'm just going to be doing a little kind of get to know me video. Most of it is going to be book related. I'm going to talk about my favourite books, my favourite tropes, all that kind of stuff. Just so you can get to know like me and my taste a little bit. Before we get on to the bookish questions, I'm just going to give you very quickly a few like random facts about me, just so you know a bit more about who I am, and then we will get into the bookish questions. My name is Phoebe, I'm 25 years old. I'm from the north of England, specifically I'm from Yorkshire. I don't have the strongest Yorkshire accent, but I think you can probably tell from my voice that I'm northern rather than southern. I've been reading for quite a long time. We'll get into specifically how long I've been reading in a minute. But yeah, my main hobby is reading. I used to do ice skating when I was younger, so I've got a particular soft spot in my heart for hockey romances and ice skating romances because I love ice skating. I've got 2 rabbits and a hamster. Anything else that's interesting about me? I really don't think so. I'm not that interesting, guys. I used to be a teacher, a secondary school teacher. I left that job in December and I'm currently between that and starting a new job which isn't teaching. I'm not going to be teaching anymore. I don't think there's anything else. I'm really not that interested. Let's get on into the bookish questions. The first question, I've got them on my phone, so if I keep looking down at my phone, that's why. First question is, how long have you been a reader? I've been a reader ever since I was a child. I was very much into reading as a young kid when I was like, I don't know, like 5 years old. I loved reading. I've still got all of my old, I can see them in the box over there, like all of my old childhood favourite books. I've kept them all over the years. See, I've been a reader for a very long time, but I haven't read consistently all throughout my life. So I'd say up until I was about 12, 13, I was quite an avid reader. I read like The Hunger Games, Divergent, everything like that when they came out. And then I went on a bit of a hiatus. Like, I definitely still read between the ages of like 12 and 18, but not that much, nowhere near the level that I do now. I would read every now and again. But as I got older, I'd say maybe between the ages of about 15 and then throughout whilst I was at uni, the first 2 years of uni, so between the ages of like 15 and 20, I really didn't read at all. I was reading like for school and for uni and stuff, but uni kind of killed my love of reading for a while. And then in my 3rd year of uni, specifically when we went into lockdown, because I was in the 3rd year of my degree, when we went into lockdown, I started reading again. I think that's quite common for a lot of people. Read as kids, kind of fell off it in like high school, secondary school, and then started reading again in lockdown. And ever since then I've been reading quite consistently between like 50 to 100-ish books a year ever since 2020. So yeah, I've been reading my whole life but not consistently my whole life. Next question, what are your most read genres? So this has definitely changed over time as well. My most read genre now is romance. My second is fantasy. I'm in a massive fantasy phase at the minute, so I'm reading loads of them, more so than I am romance, but I'd say overall my most read is romance, followed by fantasy, and another one of my favourites that I don't read enough of nowadays is historical fiction. I used to read loads of historical fiction. I'd say it used to be my main genre. I've since moved away from that a bit, not because I don't enjoy it anymore, but purely just because obviously romance books and fantasy books at the minute are getting published at like such a high rate that there's just so many of them to read, and there are obviously more talks about. So I feel like with historical fiction it's more difficult for me to find one that I'm like really excited about, if that makes sense. But I definitely need to get back into historical fiction because I do really enjoy it. But yeah, my main two at the minute are romance and fantasy. Next question, what are your favourite tropes? So I'm going to have to read these to make sure I don't forget any, and I'm sure I am still forgetting some, even though I jotted these down before because I knew if I did it off the top of my head I'd forget them. And I will absolutely still be forgetting some, but the ones that come to mind are slow burn, and I mean proper slow burn. I mean like Mariana Zapata, here's her shelf, slow burn. Like, I don't want you to even like hug each other like in any, even in a platonic way. I don't want you to be hugging until at least like 50% in, at least. I don't want you to kiss until 90% into that book. Like, I love slow burn. Enemies to lovers or hate to love. So in fantasy I love like proper enemies to lovers, like knife at the throat, I want to kill you kind of enemies to lovers. And then I feel like in romance it tends to be more like hate to love or dislike to love. I do enjoy that as well. Again, that tends to be a common theme in Mariana's Apart books, where they don't like each other, they don't get on, and then it's just that progression. I think that goes hand in hand with slow burn, because obviously it gives them a wider kind of chasm that they have to stretch over, if that makes any sense at all. I think that was quite a bad metaphor, but it's like a wider gap that they have to bridge between not liking each other and then eventually at the end falling in love. Fake dating. I love fake dating because it's like, is it real, is it not? You still get to see them interact in that romantic way, but you don't know if it's real and they don't know if it's real, and the tension. Oh, obsessed. Then smaller, like more micro trope, the one bed trope. I'm a sucker for the one bed trope. I mean, obviously you can't really build a whole book around this, so it is more of a micro trope, but yeah, I always love when the one bed trope happens, especially when they then like wake up cuddling by accident. Obsessed. Forced proximity, like they get stuck somewhere and they have to stay together, or like they get to the hotel and there's only one room, even if they have separate beds, like they have to stay in the same room or whatever. I need, in my romance books, I need them to be around each other. Even if nothing is happening, I need them to be together. Like from Luke Off With Love, for example, my favourite romance book ever, they skate at the same rink, so they're around each other all the time from the beginning, even though nothing romantic happens till like right at the end of the book. That's what I need. I need them to be around each other, and obviously an easy way for authors to do that is forced proximity, where there's a specific situation where they have to be around each other. Grumpy sunshine, but nowadays I prefer it where if it's a straight romance, like a man and a woman, I prefer it when she is grumpy rather than he is grumpy. I used to love grumpy men in books, and I still do from time to time. That I've just read Cruelty by Mariana Zapata. I am going to talk about other things within Mariana Zapata, but I read Cruelty the other day and it's reignited my obsession, so I'm sorry that I keep talking about all of her books. But just for example, I read Cruelty the other day and he is so grumpy, like so grumpy, but on the whole it's getting harder and harder for me to like grumpy men in books. I do tend to prefer it nowadays when she's grumpy and he is like a golden retriever sunshine kind of vibe. And that's all of them I could think of. There's definitely more tropes that I enjoy and that I look for in books, but they're the ones that come to mind that if I hear that a book has it, I'm like pretty set on that I'm going to read it. Next one, on quite a similar vein, what are your least favourite tropes? I don't think any of these are particularly controversial. I think these are pretty widely accepted least favourite tropes. First one is insta-love. Like if I'm reading a romance, I want it to be like tension filled. I don't want you to be obsessed with each other from the beginning. It's okay if there's like history between them. So like in A Jam, for example, by Kate Canterbury, where he's liked her since high school and they're now adults, so he's like pining, that's fine. If it's in like a one-sided pining way, I can deal with it, especially if it's historical feelings. But when it's just you meet and they literally fall in love, no. The next one is love triangle. I'm not saying that these are never done well. After hearing a few people talk about Say You Swear by Megan Brandy, I am intrigued to read that. I think I am going to give that book a go. Apparently it doesn't feel like a typical love triangle. And I don't mind love triangles so much if they're not the main point. Like, obviously in like The Hunger Games we've got a love triangle, but it's not the point of the book. I'm not reading it for that. If the whole point of the book and the main focus is the choice between two people, I tend to find it quite frustrating. I wouldn't completely write a book off because of it, but it definitely wouldn't go anywhere near the top of my TBR if I knew that a book had a love triangle and we were going to spend a lot of time focusing on it. The next one is student teacher. I just can't read it. I think I hated it anyway, but since being a teacher I just could not ever. I just can't get into the mindset and suspend my disbelief. I'm not saying it doesn't happen in real life. Obviously there's horrible people out there and it happens, but I just can't. I can't root for a student-teacher relationship, especially having been obviously a teacher in charge of young people. I just can't ever get in that mindset to root for that kind of relationship. Last one that I can think of that like I hate, that I've actually encountered. There's others that I would just never read, like Amnesia. I've never read and I don't think I would. These are ones that I've actually read and encountered. The last one is illegal age gap. Keyword illegal. Normal age gap, fine. I'll mention it one last time. Cruelty has an age gap. He's about 12, 13, maybe even more than that, years older than her. I think he might be 12, might be more. So there's an age gap in that, but it's not weird because she's 27 and he's like 39, 40. For me, that's not weird. But I can't do a legal age gap when one of them is like a minor and one of them is an adult. Even if it's only like a couple of years, it just makes me uncomfortable. But it's even worse when it's like, if she's like 16, 17 and he's like 40. Literally finds when you're on age. Literally, why are you preying on a child? Sorry if anyone loves age gap. I do love age gap. Some of my favourite books that I think about often are age gap, but not illegal age gap, not minors. No thank you. What are some of your least favourite books? Two come to mind. I went through my Goodreads to have a look at this, and I've rated quite a lot of books 2 stars. Over the last couple of years I seem to have had quite a lot of 2-star reads, but they're not books that like make me angry to think about. Like, I don't think about those books. I just didn't like them when I read them, and I've left it at that, and I don't think about them. The two that I'm going to mention now, specifically the second one that I'm going to mention, I hate. I will be the first to admit they live rent-free in my head. I hate them. I expend too much energy hating them. Whenever someone says, what's a book that you didn't like, these are the first two that come to mind. So the first one is Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. Oh God, everyone loves this book. Please don't hate me. Please don't leave me nasty comments. It just wasn't for me. I didn't enjoy it. I'm starting to think that maybe vampire romances aren't for me. There tends to be a lot of elements in vampire romances, even though I like the premise and the thought of them. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna love that. For some reason, they just don't work for me most of the time. I'm not swearing off them, but the last few I've read I just have not enjoyed at all. Did not enjoy that book. It wasn't for me. And then the one that is my least favourite book I think I've ever read. Oh, and these are books that I've finished, by the way. There's a lot of books that like I hated so much that I just DNF'd. I finished both of these books. The one that I hate most out of every book I've ever read, and that when I finished reading it, I sold my copy, but before I shipped the copy out, I couldn't even look at it, so I hid it at the back of my bookshelf, like behind other books, so I didn't even have to look at it because it made me that angry. And it's Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. I hate that book. I hate it so much. It's just, this is a problem I have, and this is why I don't read Colleen Hoover anymore. I've never been a massive fan. I've not read many of her books. I've just read a couple of the popular ones. DNF November 9, because that was nonsense. But Ugly Love, it's the fact that it's romanticised. If Colleen Hoover wrote these romances as like dark romances or toxic romances, and we knew that going in, it'd be different. It's the fact for me that Ugly Love is genuinely supposed to be a romance that people root for. People are out here expecting me to actually root for, is it Tate and Miles? Is that the name? I don't know. I don't know the names because all that's in my head is Rachel, Rachel, Rachel. Because that's all he talks about. The whole book is Rachel. No, I hate Ugly Love. I hate it. If you love it, I love that for you. But I can't root for them. And I hate that I'm supposed to. It's different in dark romance where you know what you're getting. It's different with things like Magnolia Parks. I knew going into that the characters aren't nice and that it's toxic. And I love that series because of it. But Ugly Love isn't supposed to be that. Ugly Love, we're actually supposed to like them and want them to be together. What? No, I can't. And ending the video on a positive note, what are some of your favourite books? So I have quite a lot of books that like make me giddy and that I really like. I've chosen 4 that have stood the test of time. So I keep talking about Culty. That's not on this list. I think over time it will be. But for me to call a book a favourite, I have to sit with it for like months and be still thinking about it a long time after. So I'm going to start with 2 that aren't perhaps what you would expect. They're not like fantasies or romances or anything. The first one is The Book Thief. I read this, I've read it a few times. I read it for the first time I think in 2016 and I just love it. The way that it's written, the stylistic choices, it's just beautiful. It's so harrowing, it's so emotional. It's one of the books that just made me weep when I read it because it is so sad. Narration, I won't spoil who it's narrated by, but the narration is just genius. Most of the books I read, I actually don't read for stylistic choices. I read for enjoyment, hence a lot of the books like the Addicted series, Mariana's Apart, I read books primarily for escapism and for enjoyment. I don't usually care about writing, but this is one of those books that I love it because it's just so beautifully written. The next one is 1984, which again I think a lot of people hate. I am a dystopia girly at heart. I can't believe I didn't mention that earlier with my favourite genres. Again, I don't read enough dystopia anymore, but I used to be a dystopia girly and I need to get back into it because I'm just so obsessed. I love the social commentary in dystopia. That's what I read dystopia for. Hence why I probably don't read it that often anymore, because I don't want to think about everything wrong with the world more so than I already do. It's one of those books that I appreciate rather than read it for enjoyment. If I was in a book slump and I wanted to reread a favourite, I wouldn't be picking up 1984 because I don't think it'd get me out of a slump. The next one is the Heartstopper series. Oh my god, the book series, the graphic novels, the Netflix series, I'm just obsessed. I love Heartstopper so much. It's just one of those series that just lives so deep within me. I'm just obsessed with it. It's so important but also so accessible and so easy, and everyone needs to read Heartstopper, please, or at least watch the Netflix show, because I think the Netflix show is very well done. They stay very loyal to the book. And then the last one that I've already mentioned, it's no surprise, is From Luke with Love. It was hard for a long time for a romance to make it onto my favourite books, because I used to read books when I was in uni, like 1984 and The Book Thief. I used to read those like because I appreciate the writing, whereas now the reasons I read have so completely changed. I don't really read books like that anymore. I massively read for enjoyment, and I enjoyed this book so much. It's between two figure skaters, and obviously I used to be a figure skater, so I love that element. It's the slowest of slow burns. It's grumpy, which I like. They're both really grumpy. Marianne Zapata writes, not in all of her books, don't get me wrong, Dear Aaron was pathetic, but in most of her books she writes really good, strong female characters who can hold their own, and I love it so much. That is everything for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did like, please give it a thumbs up down below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you in my next one. Bye!